Hello, wonderful person watching this video. Welcome to my final oral presentations for this week's modules 7 and 8. Once again, this presentation is inspired by the concept of draw my life. Except this time, instead of drawing my entire life, we're talking about growing up as being a Filipino and also experiencing the racism, family expectations, and also an 18th birthday party that was mentioned in a film. So very relaxing topics, you'll see. Usually when people talk about growing up, we think about graduating, going to college, getting a job, and also just being independent. And sometimes discovering that apparently bills just keep coming every single month. But nobody really warned us about that part. Module 7 and 8 made me think about another part of growing up. It's not only about asking, what do I want to become? Sometimes we have to ask, who am I becoming? And more importantly, do I have to leave parts of myself behind in order to get there? And that question became really clear to me while watching the debut. Ben Mercado is a Filipino-American teenager who is trying to figure out his future. But his problem is bigger than simply just choosing a college or what he wants to do after school. He's also trying to figure out where he belongs, and that connects closely with what I learned from the readings. Before these modules, it was easy for me to think about identity as something pretty straightforward. You are Filipino, you are American, you speak the language, you do not speak the language, you know the traditions, you do not sometimes. Check the boxes, and congratulations! You have successfully completed your cultural identity application. Except, obviously, people do not work like that. Schobel's reading especially helped me understand that Filipino-American identity develops through history, all the family migration stories, and personal experience. It does not simply disappear because someone grows up in America. Ben is Filipino and American at the same time. But instead of seeing those identities as something that can exist together, he starts feeling like he has to choose, and that becomes the beginning of his problem. Ben wants to pursue art. His father, Roland, has a different idea of what Ben's future should look like. Roland wants him to pursue a more secure and respectable career, and I feel like many Filipino kids watching this already knows exactly where this conversation is going. You say, I want to study art. Your parents hear. So, what you're saying is, you would like to be unemployed? Obviously, I'm exaggerating, a little, but underneath their argument is something serious. Ben sees his father as controlling. Roland sees himself as protecting his son. Roland has worked and sacrificed so Ben can have opportunities that earlier generations couldn't do. So when Roland pushes towards Ben a secure career, part of that pressure comes from love itself. But love can still become pressure when parents stop listening to what their children actually want. And that is one thing I appreciated about this film. It's relatable. Roland is not simply the villain, and Ben is not completely right either. And so, these are two people who care about each other, but have completely different definitions of what is successful in life and what it should look like. Then, we arrive at Rose's debut. And if you have ever attended a large Filipino gathering, you already know that nobody is simply attending a birthday. You are also attending a family reunion, and also just a bunch of food in the buffet line, and also just questions where family members and aunties and uncles will be asking you about your status check and just mandatory feeding sessions. You can literally be holding a plate of food and sometimes someone will come by and ask, did you eat? But Rose's debut becomes important because Ben enters a celebration already disconnected from it. At first, these traditions seems old-fashioned to him. They represent the Filipino world that he has been trying to distance himself from. But as the night continues, he begins seeing something different about it. The debut is not simply a tradition copy from the Philippines. It has become part of the Filipino-American life. Young people, older generations, Filipino traditions, American influences, and also the music, pop culture, clothing, and the family all exist in the same place. That connects to Schobel's challenge to the old idea of assimilation, and that immigrants simply become American, and their ethnic identity slowly disappears. Filipino American continue creating new cultural forms from both experiences. Culture does not survive because it stays completely frozen. Sometimes culture survives because people keep giving it new meaning. Module 7 and 8 also made me think about why someone might come embarrassed or be embarrassed about their own culture in the first place. Sometimes, that embarrassment does not appear out of nowhere. It can develop after years of stereotypes and jokes. Okumura discusses how Filipino Americans in Hawaii have been represented through racist stereotypes, and how some young Filipinos eventually distance themselves from their own culture because they don't want to choose those stereotypes or they don't want it to be attached to them. And this part felt especially familiar to me because I've experienced this in my own life. Growing up in Hawaii, I've heard Filipino stereotypes before. Things like, do Filipinos eat dog? Or reducing Filipinos to an accent, adobo, or being FOB or fresh out of the boat, or whatever stereotype someone decides to represent millions of people that day. And usually someone eventually says, relax, just a joke. But humor is not automatically the harmless thing because people laugh. Research on local ethnic humor also shows that repeated jokes can contribute to shame and reinforce the same racial ideas people claim they are making fun of. And that does not mean nobody can ever joke about culture. Clearly, I've already made several Filipino family jokes in this presentation. The difference is asking, who is telling the joke, who is being reduced by it, and who has to carry the stereotype after everyone else stops laughing. This is where I started seeing the debut differently. The story is not only about Ben versus his dad. There are generations of experience sitting behind their argument. One generation worries that the next will forget the culture. Another generation reminds or remembers struggle and wants his children to have stability in life. Then, the younger generation wants freedom to create a life that actually feels like it's their own. Basically, everyone loves each other, and everybody is stressing everybody out. But each generation is protecting something. The older generation protects memory. Roland protects security. Ben protects his independence. The problem happens because none of them completely understands what the other person is afraid of losing. And that made me realize that learning our family history does not mean we have to copy the exact lives of our parents or even our grandparents has passed down. And it means understanding why they think the way they do before deciding what we want to carry forward. Eventually, everything Ben has been avoiding comes together. His family, his future, his embarrassment, his father's expectations, and his own family. This becomes the biggest lesson I took from the debut. Ben's mistake is not wanting independence. He should be allowed to choose his own dream. His mistake is thinking that becoming independent requires him to become embarrassed by where he came from. At the same time, Roland's mistake is not wanting his own son to succeed. His mistake is believing that there's only one acceptable version of success. So the ethical question becomes, how can families preserve culture without controlling the people who inherit it? And on the other side, how can younger generations become independent without treating the sacrifices and traditions of older generations as something embarrassing? I do not think the answer is choosing one side, but the answer is learning how to listen for both ways. This lesson also connects to how I think about my own identity. As a Filipino and Ilocano student living in Hawaii, Filipino culture is part of my life through my family, the language that I speak, the food that I eat, the school community that I surround myself in, and the things I choose to create. At the same time, my future is not going to look exactly like the lives of the generations before me, and I know that. I do not think it's supposed to be, but what I learned from these modules is that preserving culture does not mean copying the past perfectly. It means understanding the past well enough that we can make responsible choices about what happens next in our chapter. For me, that can mean learning Ilocano, participating in my community, studying Filipino culture, and even using technology in the things I create to help represent my culture. And that is why I like the idea of repairing the mirror instead of replacing it. The cracks stay there, They represent colonization, racism, the stereotypes, the family conflicts that we've experienced, the loss of our language over years, and all of the complicated history that the Filipino American inherits. But those cracks do not mean the identity is broken. They become part of the story that we make. Overall, Module 7 and 8, the debut, taught me that growing up does not require leaving our culture behind. Being Filipino American does not mean choosing Filipino or American. It means recognizing all the history, the relationship, and also choices that shape who we are today. And maybe maturity is not reaching the point where we finally have our identity completely figured out. Maybe maturity is being willing to keep asking questions. The next time we hear an ethnic joke, feel embarrassed by something from our culture, or disagree with an older generation, maybe we should ask why before immediately pushing it away. Ask where the stereotypes came from. Ask what our parents experienced. Ask what our grandparents carried. And then decide what we want to carry next. Because eventually, every generation receives something from the generation before it. But eventually, we become the generation heading something forward. So the question I want to leave with you guys is, when the next generation looks back at us, what will we have taught them to remember? And what will we have taught them to be proud of?